Welcome to Docket Unsealed, where we uncover the cases that continue to raise questions long after the headlines have faded. From unexplained disappearances and shocking murders to investigations filled with hidden details, we examine the evidence, the timeline, and the people at the center of each case. Some stories are difficult to hear, some remain unsolved, and others reveal how a single overlooked detail can change everything. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at one of those cases. So, let's begin. Look at these photographs of Martine Vik Magnussen. She is smiling, celebrating with her friends, and enjoying what should have been a memorable evening. In some of the pictures, she is standing alongside a young man she knew from university. At the time, there was nothing unusual about them being together. They were friends and part of the same social group. But when the night was coming to an end, Martine decided to leave the club with him. These would be among the last photographs ever taken of her. Martine was 23 years old, a Norwegian student living in London, and that evening she had something special to celebrate. She had just come top of her class at university. With her future seemingly full of possibilities, she had no idea that within hours, everything would change. Martine had grown up on Loya, a small island outside Oslo in Norway. She was the middle of 3 children, with an older brother and younger sister. Her childhood was described as happy, and she was an active and sociable young woman who loved being outdoors and spending time around the water. Martine was bright and ambitious, and initially decided that she wanted to study medicine. At 21, she left Norway and moved to Warsaw, but after several months in Poland, she realized that medicine was no longer the path she wanted to follow. Rather than continuing with something that no longer felt right, she made the difficult decision to change direction. She still wanted to study and experience more of the world, and London seemed like the perfect place to do both. In 2007, she moved to the United Kingdom and enrolled at Regent Business School to study international business relations. Martine quickly settled into life in central London and moved into a flat with 3 other young Norwegian women. Their home was filled with friends, parties, laughter, and the busy social life that came with living in the city. Martine also worked part-time at the Mulberry store in Mayfair. She and her flatmates enjoyed going out, but they were sensible and had an arrangement that if one of them wasn't going to come home, they would let the others know. Martine didn't particularly like walking through London alone late at night. She was sociable, but she was also cautious. At university, Martine built another circle of friends, including a 2 one-year-old student named Farooq Abdulhak. Abdulhak came from an extremely wealthy Yemeni family. His father, Shaher Abdulhak, had built a huge business empire and was one of Yemen's wealthiest and most influential businessmen. Farooq had grown up internationally, spending time in different countries before eventually enrolling at Regents. He had grown up with considerable wealth and privilege and was described as confident and accustomed to getting his own way. Martine and Abdulhak became friends over a period of around 8 months, but there was a complication. Abdulhak was attracted to Martine and wanted their friendship to become something more. Martine didn't feel the same way. Her friends knew that he was interested in her, and Martine herself was aware of it. On at least one occasion, he tried to kiss her, but she pulled away. She later told friends that she couldn't understand why he had done it, because she had never given him a reason to believe that she wanted a romantic relationship. The situation was beginning to affect their friendship, but Martine didn't want to completely cut him out of her life. On the evening of Thursday, March 14th, 2008, none of those concerns appeared to be at the front of Martine's mind. She and her flatmates were preparing for a night out, and they had something to celebrate. Martine had come top of her class, and the women were heading into Mayfair to enjoy themselves. Their destination was Maddox, an exclusive members club that at the time was popular with wealthy young Londoners, celebrities, and international students. Martine was comfortable in that environment. She was confident, stylish, and surrounded by people she knew. Abdulhak was there, along with other friends, and for several hours everyone drank, danced, and celebrated. Photographs were taken throughout the evening, including pictures of Martine and Abdulhak together. They appeared relaxed and happy, with no obvious sign of an argument or tension between them. By around 3:20 in the morning, most of Martine's friends had decided that they wanted to go home. But Martine wanted to continue partying. Because Abdulhak lived only a short distance away, she decided to go back to his flat and continue the evening there. Her friends weren't immediately concerned because she was going with someone they all knew from university. Martine had also lost her mobile phone about a week earlier, so they knew they might not receive their usual message telling them where she was. Under normal circumstances, there was little reason for them to think something was wrong. Friday morning arrived, and Martine still hadn't returned to the flat. Her friends knew where she had gone, and they knew she didn't have her phone, so they weren't immediately alarmed. But by around 4 p.m., they began sending her messages through Facebook. They also contacted Abdulhak, but there was no response. Martine had plans with her friends that evening, and when she failed to arrive, their concern became much more serious. The following day, her flatmates began contacting university friends and speaking to people who had been out with Martine that night. Gradually, they established that Martine had left Maddox with Abdulhak. But now Abdulhak couldn't be contacted either. The friends checked Facebook again and discovered that Abdulhak had posted a status during the early hours of Friday morning, saying, "Home alone." That made no sense, because Martine had left the club with him. Then his Facebook profile disappeared altogether. It had been deleted. Martine was missing. The last person known to have been with her wasn't answering messages, and his online presence had suddenly vanished. Her friends went to the police and reported her missing. They provided officers with a photograph of Martine, writing Abdulhak's name and address on the back. They also contacted Martine's parents in Norway. Police went to Abdulhak's flat at Seaford Court on the morning of Sunday, March 16th. He wasn't there, and the flat appeared to have been abandoned in a hurry. His passport was gone, along with his wallet, phone, and some of his clothes. But officers quickly found something else: a woman's top. When they compared it with photographs taken at Maddox, they established that it was the same top Martine had been wearing on the night she disappeared. Martine had been inside the flat. Then an officer noticed something on the floor. Small droplets of blood formed a trail leading away from the apartment. The trail continued down the stairs toward the basement, where the droplets stopped beside a locked door. At around 10:20 that morning, officers entered the basement. Inside, they found building materials and rubble. Beneath them was the body of Martine Vik Magnussen. Her body had been partially concealed beneath construction debris, with one of her arms still visible. The search for Martine was over, but the investigation had now become a murder case. The post-mortem examination revealed that Martine had suffered numerous injuries to her head, face, neck, and body. There was evidence that she had fought during the attack, and the examination also found evidence that she had been sexually assaulted. Her cause of death was strangulation. The findings indicated that she had not simply been unconscious or incapacitated during the attack. She had fought back and had fought hard for her life. The forensic evidence created a direct connection between Martine, the flat, and the man police urgently wanted to find. Her clothing was inside his home, her blood formed a trail leading from the apartment toward the basement, and her body had been concealed beneath the building where he lived. But Abdulhak was already out of the country. Less than a day after Martine was last seen alive, he boarded a flight from London to Cairo. From Egypt, he traveled onward to Yemen. By the time police and Martine's friends fully understood what had happened, he was already back in his home country. This created an enormous problem for British investigators. Britain did not have an extradition treaty with Yemen, and Yemen did not ordinarily extradite its own citizens. Even if British police could confirm where Abdulhak was, they couldn't simply enter Yemen, arrest him, and bring him back to London. Abdulhak's father was extremely wealthy and had extensive business and political connections in Yemen and beyond. Within days of Martine's body being discovered, he was reported to have taken legal advice about the situation and met with senior government figures. In July 2008, British police formally named Farouk Abdulhak as the suspect they wanted to speak to in connection with Martine's murder. His photograph was placed on Scotland Yard's wanted website, but Abdulhak remained in Yemen. Over the years, there were repeated attempts to find a way forward. Martine's friends and family refused to allow the case to disappear. Her father campaigned tirelessly for justice for his daughter and worked with officials in Norway and Britain. There were meetings involving senior Norwegian politicians, including a former prime minister, as well as attempts to persuade Abdulhak and his family to cooperate. At different points, it appeared that there might be some possibility of progress, but ultimately, nothing came of those efforts. Martin's family were left with the painful knowledge that the man British investigators regarded as the main suspect remained outside the reach of the British courts. More than a decade after Martin's death, BBC Arabic journalist Nawal al-Maghafi managed to establish contact with Abdul Haq. Eventually, their conversations turned to the events of 2008, and Abdul Haq acknowledged a degree of responsibility for Martin's death. However, his account was very different from the case built by British investigators. He claimed that Martin had died accidentally during consensual sexual activity and described what happened as an accident. He said that he regretted leaving Britain and suggested that, looking back, he should have stayed and faced what had happened. However, he did not agree to return to Britain to face justice. It is important to distinguish between Abdul Haq's account and what has been legally established. His version has never been tested in a British courtroom. He has never been convicted of Martin's murder, and there has never been a trial in which a jury heard the prosecution evidence against him. His lawyers have not presented a defense before a British court or had witnesses questioned in such a trial. British authorities, however, have continued to regard him as the suspect they want returned in connection with Martin's murder. There was another development in 2022, when police arrested a woman in her 60s on suspicion of assisting an offender. Her identity was not publicly confirmed, and there was speculation about a possible connection to Abdul Haq, although police did not publicly identify her as a member of his family. Then, in March 2025, the Metropolitan Police renewed their appeal for Abdul Haq to return to Britain. They released a more recent image of him and made clear that their efforts to bring him back would continue. For Martin's family, the nightmare has continued for more than 17 years. They lost their daughter in horrific circumstances and have spent years campaigning for justice. They established the Martine Foundation for Justice in her memory, with the aim of supporting other families who face legal, financial, or international barriers after someone they love has been killed. At her university, a tree was planted in Martin's memory, and her family have continued to make sure that her name is not forgotten. On the final evening of her life, Martin had every reason to be happy. She had come top of her class and was celebrating with people she cared about. She was only 23 years old, and her future was just beginning. Instead, her family and friends have spent the years since her death attending meetings, speaking with governments, and continuing to campaign for justice. Her friends have had to repeatedly revisit the final night they spent with her, while her family have had to build a campaign around the death of a daughter they should have been watching grow older and enjoy her life. And that brings us to the end of this case here on Docket Unsealed. The evidence may have provided answers, but the story also leaves behind questions that can stay with us long after the investigation is over. Thank you for watching, and for taking the time to follow the case with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, sometimes the smallest detail can reveal the biggest truth. This is Docket Unsealed.